And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I am Kieran Steckley, and with me, as always, is a man who recently had to take up Pig Latin in order to sufficiently do his job. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
I don't even know what that's in reference to. Maybe I didn't check the news enough this week, other than the whole government shutdown thing. All right. Anyway, on to some baseball. What do we got? We had the GM
we got
meetings. We had Tarik
we got
Skubal,
G-Manny's,
Cy
and we
Young
got
Award.
Tarik Skubal. So we recorded an instant reaction, and this was before Skubal did his availability, talking to the media post winning the award, or excuse me, being announced the winner of the award. Nice little family moment you could see on MLB Network and some of the coverage afterward. But since we last talked, Cody, you had a chance to hear from Tarik Skubal, so I thought this might be a good place to start. How was Mr. Daniel Skubal after joining the historic list of guys who have been able to accomplish that 2 times in a row?
He was good. Skubal's done this enough now. He knows what to say. He knows the drill. We should probably just go right into the good stuff, right? He did address his future a little bit, and it was, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 10, I don't know how interesting it was. A 4 or 5, maybe better than like a 1 or a 2. Um, I think kind of the big quotes, if you're watching on YouTube, we have these up here. He talked about loving the city of Detroit. Hopefully I'm here. I think that's where I'm at with that. He said, I think a lot of that is out of my control, especially the trade stuff. Obviously, contract extension stuff is a little bit different, but the trade stuff is out of my control. I've given everything I have to this organization, and I want to be a Tiger for a very long time. But those things, the business part of the game, they're just different, right? I don't get to write my own contracts in that sense. I'm just going to do what I got to do and not really focus on that stuff. I don't know that there's anything groundbreaking in there, but there is a little more talk about wanting to stay in Detroit, about the mere possibility of an extension than we had heard before. We'll get to what Scott Boras said here in a minute. So I don't know, Kieran, to you, does that move the needle at all?
Well, it doesn't move the needle, but I look at that in a positive sense. So what I mean by that is there have been times where Scubal's been a little bit more guarded about, like, this is the organization that drafted me. Like he like, it's still PC, but it's a little less giving. And this was a pretty giving PC answer. So do I think does it ultimately change anything? No, but at the same time, it was something better than, I mean, we'll see what happens. Yeah,
Yeah, his line had be, I'm just going to let my agent handle that. This was a
yeah,
little bit more interjecting himself and some thoughts.
and
Now,
ingraining himself into the
yeah,
community aspect of it, and it's like, I've given everything for this organization, so he's like telling the fans, like, this is purposeful. He knows the drill. Like, this is purposeful. Like, I have done everything in my power for this organization. I hope to continue to do that. This obviously doesn't tie him to anything, so that's okay. But like, he did lean into it while obviously being non-committal and being frank, but still lean into it in a way that I do believe is a positive. It's not like a positive development, but it's a positive stance, as opposed to the purely neutral thing. Is like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, let me Angel handle that. I can't control anything. So you know what I mean. It's about the same as wearing the workout tee and posting that on Instagram and going to the Arizona Fall League, and seeing Kevin and buffed up with with Kevin McGonigal and all that stuff. Like, it doesn't actually mean anything, but it is more of a positive outlook
yeah.
from the Tigers fan perspective than what it really could be.
Yeah. Some of the other whispers to come out of GM meetings was Ken Rosenthal reported a Tigers person who said, we want to win with him, which kind of obvious, I think, but I guess it's better than, no, we want to trade him. And then
Right.
you had Jeff Greenberg, who was filling in for Scott Harris, had to attend to a family matter, I believe. So Jeff
Hope everything's
Greenberg
good there.
did, yes, absolutely. Greenberg did the talking, and like his counterpart Scott Harris, did not comment on Skubal. Sounds like that's going to be their policy, which again, no, don't necessarily blame them, but if you didn't want to trade him, you could come out and say we're not going to trade him. So
Right.
I don't think anything really changes. Clearly, they are going to listen to offers. If someone blows them away, they have to consider it. But as we talked about, they're not in a position where they have to trade or move Skubal. I guess since Tarik, some people got mad. He said that that's out of my control. He was talking more about the trade. He did say, as we just read off, contract extension a little bit more. So maybe we can get to what the man who's maybe really pulling some of these strings had to say. Here is Scott Boras, this video courtesy of SNY.
The most recent talks with the Tigers, do you anticipate that they'll keep Skubal instead of trading him?
All we know is that the fans in Detroit want the Tigers to build a Tarik Barrack. Little Caesar's running around town saying "Sai Sai," so it's a kind of thing where he's built a base. Obviously, everywhere they go, they know it's Skubal Day. They understand that organization is substantially different if he's not there, and when you're in these situations and you go through it, all we know is that we hear mostly from the fans, and the player hears from the fans, and it's kind of like it should be Scooby done, right? And if not, I think the fans would certainly think it's a Detroit doink if they don't.
Have they approached you about an extension again at this point, or is that something that you're anticipating?
We talk a lot, and through the concourse of the offseason, we'll continue to discuss. Our point of view is that we always listen. We're prepared to listen to about anything that Chris or really Scott has to say. So we'll just see how it goes.
All right. I'll ask you again, Kieran.
Real quick. I know it's not exactly pig Latin, but that's what I was referencing.
I don't think that's pig Latin, but it is kind of ridiculous and almost indecipherable, sure.
So that's what I was referencing. I know it's literally speaking, it's not pig Latin, but that's what I was referencing. Because when you just read that for the first time, you just, without hearing the quotes, and even like the middle part where he's actually answering the question a little bit, you're just like, what is going on here?
Anyone unaware, Boras does these puns every year at GM meetings and winter meetings. It's part of the shtick. It's in a way fun, but they do seem to get progressively worse every year. I think the only part that halfway matters is maybe the end where he says, we will always listen to anything Chris and Scott have to say. Of course, listening and doing are very different things, but like the Tigers didn't come out and say, we're not going to trade Skubal. Scott Boras has yet to come out and say, oh, there's no way in the world we would sign there. Obviously, he's not going to say that. That kind of leads to a point we haven't talked about in a long time, which is, if the Tigers could extend Tarik Skubal, should they? There was definitely a point in this whole timeline where I almost leaned no, just a pitcher, 10 years, blah, blah, blah. But the more we've seen Skubal, the more we've seen him be the best pitcher in the game, certainly the best left-hander in the game. He might be just good enough that you can't replace him, that he's worth whatever that price tag is. So any sort of deal would come with risks. I still think it's pretty unlikely. But if you're the Tigers, I do think you have to float your best possible offer before we move any further with this whole saga.
I have some thoughts on that. But first, we got to get to a break and a kind word from our sponsors.
Kratz Pop Quiz. What has 35 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, comes in excellent flavors like, of course, chocolate, vanilla, but chocolate peanut butter, my favorite. No added sugar, gluten-free, under $5 per meal, and is ready to drink.
Go out the house, get yourself a Huel. Look at you. You even have one right there? Ready to smack that, John? Chocolate peanut butter, chocolate, and vanilla. Deliciosos.
Also, there is a new Daily Greens ready to drink. 42 vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. Only 25 calories on that one. 4 grams of fiber. There's flavors like blueberry, apple, peach, Huel makes healthy eating simple. They also just launched into Target stores nationwide. Try both products today with 15% off your purchase for new customers with the code FOUL at huel.com/FOUL. Use that code FOUL and fill out the post-checkout survey to help support FT.
All right. So there's actually something in that Boras clip that obviously we know, talking about his client and the value and all that stuff. We all get that. But the whole, like, everywhere they go, it's a Skubal Day thing actually kind of, like, obvious. That's obvious. But it actually did kind of get me thinking, like, no one's really talked about the value of Tarik Skubal as having Tarik Skubal on your team. We talk about the value of him, like what he does on the mound, but I mean, we see a lot of Skubal jerseys. His days obviously do well at the park. You know, beer sales, hot dogs. You know, other merchandise, things like that. Those bobbleheads are still probably going really high on eBay. It was kind of forbidden from buying one because they were so expensive. So there is more value to Skubal than just obviously having him, take the rubber every fifth or sixth day. So I am of the opinion that this is a good deal. Like you could pay the most ever for a starting pitcher and still have a good deal for Tarik Skubal in the grand scheme of things. In addition to what he, at this point, he's also a guy who legitimizes your franchise. Like currently, he also legitimizes your franchise process moving forward. And so, like, those are things that don't get talked about as much because they're a little bit less tangible, and it's not really like there's no history of it, like with pitchers and 30 years old and blah, blah, blah. But I think that stuff should be taken into consideration if you're the owner, right? Like that should be part of it if you're Chris. So, like, I'm of the opinion Skubal's not going to get cheaper as the days go on. So if you are really interested, giving him a serious offer, having serious discourse, if you're doing the whole protect yourself and negotiation thing, kind of put the onus on Boras Co. to tell you no. I think that actually could be like good business from the Tigers' perspective. So, just another little thought.
I think that's the one Scott Boras trap. I don't know that you can really avoid it, but the second you offer X amount, you just set the absolute floor for him. But I don't know that there's a way around that.
Well, the floor's already low because he's already offered like $100 million.
Yeah, if you don't make a real serious offer before moving on, then that would be disappointing. But all right, we have the rest of the winter and maybe all next year and maybe all next offseason to talk about Tarik Skubal. We can get to some other matters from the GM meetings. Jeff Greenberg, again, he was the guy doing the talking here. And shocker, the Tigers, they want to add some pitching. I did find it interesting. He seemed to note that as the main priority. Talked about the return of Jack Flaherty. Also said that does not preclude them from getting another starter. And he said ultimately they need to upgrade the bullpen. He didn't tie himself to any roles. He said there are a few multiple ways to go about doing that. So, again, nothing groundbreaking here, but sounds like they're going to go after multiple relievers, which they have to. Sounds like they're going to go after another starter. Greenberg didn't really hint which part of the market, but I'm personally of the belief it needs to be the higher end. Maybe not the highest end, but, again, Michael King, name I like a lot, someone of that ilk. He talked about the need for swing and miss. There didn't seem to be much mention of position players, which is probably the most interesting crux in all this, at least not outside Gleyber Torres. So how did you walk away from that one feeling, Kieran?
Well, I walked away with a similar question that we ponder a lot, which is like, if you believe in your process, are you able to adjust said process? Because they went into the last year trying to, fill a couple starting pitcher roles. The Flaherty one, we loved it at the time. In the middle, it was a little dicey. And at the end, it's like, okay, yeah, this is a good thing, blah, blah, blah. He's going to return for 2026. But the Alex Cobb aspect, there's going to be a million Alex Cobbs out there, Cody. Guys that are a little older, maybe have some injury history. It's not like he was cheap. It wasn't like, minimum wage starting pitching that they signed him for. So my thought is, have you learned your lesson? Are you willing to give I don't know, dude, like 3 for 60, 2 for 45, caliber pitcher on the market, not just try to do the rental thing, not just try to be able to brag about your innings per $1 million ratio, which is really out of the whack. I don't know if you noticed that with the Alex Cobb signing. That's my question. I would thought that beforehand, and then seeing like, oh, we got to get a starting pitcher. It's like, okay, but then it's also like, in terms of the tier, like, where are you comfortable too with the guys that you got? Because, Reese Olson, they gave an injury update. Looks like, Reese Olson, obviously the anticipation is he'll be fine going into next season. You have the Troy Melton situation, which I think we all agree he is best suited as a starter. And then you have a bunch of other guys that, all things being equal, you would like to see have some sort of opportunity to fill a role. If you start trying to plug away with too many guys to fill a limited amount of opportunity, I actually feel like that's a negative, and even though it's quote unquote like competition. So like I would almost like it a little bit higher end and a little bit more purposely slotted.
I'm glad you brought that up, Kieran. I think that's a pretty good point. I don't think you're in the timeline where going after the Alex Cobbs of the world is correct. And given the fact that you stand to lose Tarik Skubal, Casey Mize, and Jack Flaherty after 2026, you're almost doing some advance work for next offseason. You can't just be filling craters in your rotation. So I think you need to get a pretty good guy on a multi-year deal. Michael King, the Athletics picking him to get 3 years, 75. Shota Imanaga, a name I like a lot. I think the Athletics picking him to take the qualifying offer. Zach Gallen, 2 years, 42. So these aren't deals that are totally breaking the bank, but you're getting someone better than the Alex Cobbs of the world. You're getting someone who's had varying levels of success. I think that's what they need to be going after. I guess it's always fun to throw around Verlander or Scherzer, which you could argue make a little more sense than they did even this time last year. But again, it's not like you need a bundle of starters, even though you can never have enough pitching. I think you got to get someone on a multi-year deal without any doubt.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, let's move on because we'll have plenty of time to talk about that stuff as well throughout the offseason, to another award winner that is from the Tigers, and that's Zach McKinstry. We didn't get a chance to talk about this. Was named a Silver Slug Award winner for the utility role. So congratulations to Zach McKinstry. Obviously, seems like a good guy. You've interacted with him on a daily basis. Love his story, the Central Michigan aspect of it. All-star, blah, blah, blah. Like all that stuff is great. So I want to say congratulations to him on that. A career year for one Zach McKinstry. He was a 3.1 offensive award player last year, Cody. Made 128 starts. He's going to be 31 next year. So this is, congratulations, but also got to pivot here. We're a look forward podcast right now. He's going to be 31 next year. We talk a lot about Colt Keith. We talk a lot about Javi. We talk a lot of the Torres thing, which Greenberg said we valued him. Blah blah blah. He's gonna have to make a decision. Torque even. We don't really talk about where McKinstry slots in this, and he made 128 starts last year. It's not a small number, and obviously he was an all-star and Silver Slugger, like I said. Am I right to be a little bit nervous about what is statistically an outlier of outlier seasons? He has had seasons with bad teams where he had that amount of at-bats, but he also was not nearly as good as he was last year. So that's a tough one. That's just something to have in the back of your mind, everybody. It's just in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the reality is McKinstry's had 3-ish good months in his entire Tigers tenure. maybe the floor was a little bit higher for him than it had been throughout last season, but the second half was not great. I think that's my fear, and I think when we talk about position players, would they get another infielder in addition to Gleyber Torres if he takes the qualifying offer? For as much as you have some young hitters you can expect to continue to get better, you also have, I think, a lot of regression candidates on this team. Zach McKinstry being a big one. I mean, just go around the diamond. I don't know that Dingler, I don't know, maybe Dingler is he going to hit 278? Like, I think there's more power in there, but I'm not sure. Torkelson still worries you a little bit. I don't know that there's another level in there, and there could be some regression. Gleyber, I wouldn't pick him as a regression candidate, but you never know. Javi, for sure, already regressed, but is he even going to be capable of doing anything like the May or June he had? Colt Keith maybe could get better. But even Riley Green, as much as you'd like to see him cut down on the strikeouts, another Silver Slugger winner, is he going to hit 36 home runs again? I don't think that's a guarantee. Winsel Perez, Can he do what he did from both sides of the plate? One thing we haven't talked about with McKinstry, the way he hit left-handers was kind of out of nowhere. And it was impressive, and it was huge. But can he do it again? I think it's a fair question. Maybe you can bank on some bounce back from Meadows or from Matt Vierling. But there are also too many guys who I'm just not comfortable riding with and expecting them to do what they did or exceed the way they performed at the plate last season.
This is where that internal survey, internal study that Scott Harris referenced at the end of season news conference, really comes into play, because you've gotten good enough that pretty much any move you make that takes away playing time or replaces somebody that you're using is going to kind of come with some hurt feelings. Yeah. From the player, or even from someone who is kind of like a fan favorite, type deal or whatever. So that's going to be tough, because I think we would agree that the team is not good enough to win a World Series right now. But I think we would also agree that in order to get good enough to win a World Series, tough calls are going to have to be made. It's sort of like, oh yeah, government should be more efficient. We should spend less. And it's like, all right, you want to cut this, and then you're like, I don't know if I really want to cut all that. Right. It's like, well, it has to be somehow. Like, you have to get better somehow. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
we talked a little bit last episode. Should we be talking less about third base and more about center field? But then you look, the best center fielder available is probably Trent Grisham, who's coming off a career year and a contract year. He does walk a lot, but he historically does not hit for a high average. He didn't even have a good defensive year last year. He's a little more proven than Parker Meadows, even though some of the same, their profiles are actually very similar, I think. So, would you want to pay Trent Grisham over a Parker Meadows? And I would kind of say no. You might have a very similar player. But to your point, those are the type of judgments that might determine whether the Tigers can take a step forward. Can you replace an existing player that you hope will be good for a player who maybe is already at that level? I'm not saying they should go sign Trent Grisham, but those are kind of the hard judgments that they have to make at this point in their competitive cycle. Speaking of fan favorites, they just got rid of Alex Lange. That's kind of a similar judgment. They DFA'd him for kind of another waiver wire pickup. Darnell Duggan, Michigan native. Hope I pronounced that right. Could be Dugan. I don't know. Went to Adrian College. But, for one of these other project guys, they got rid of Lange. I think some people didn't love that. But honestly, I understand it. Lange was at a point where he was making more than the league minimum. He's going up for arbitration. He just hadn't quite proven that he could throw consistent strikes. It'd be great if you could somehow get him back in your org, but at this point, a 40-man spot, a little extra payday, coming off injury. It sucks because it's easy to fall in love with that good version of Alex Lange that we saw very briefly. But in terms of making the hard decisions, I get why they are willing to part with Alex Lange.
Yeah, and again, that's somewhat of an example of stakes being raised. because
Absolutely.
like 2 years ago, you're not parting with someone of that talent, that upside in the back end of your bullpen, because you just want to get as many kind of lottery tickets as possible. Now you're not. Now you need guys that are more reliable. I know it's a pitcher, but it's like you got to hit some doubles. You're not necessarily trying. You don't have to hit home runs every time with some of these guys in terms of their role and their usage and all that stuff. So
Yeah, and I wouldn't look
as
at
far
this
as
as a one
it
for
was fine.
one like Lange
Yeah.
for Duggan.
Right.
Like it's
Right.
more like
Right.
clearing a 40-man spot that they can do some other stuff with throughout
It's
the
only
course
40.
of the year.
It's only 40. You know what I mean? Like they call it the 40 man for a reason. It's only 40, and most organizations have more than 40 guys that they would like to be able to keep and just like hold on to in perpetuity. It's not how it works. So hopefully he lands on his feet, and he's a young family man now. Looks like everything's going well with him personally. Hopefully, professionally, he's able to find success. So we wish him
Also, big
all the best.
apologies. Duggan Darnell, not Darnell Duggan. That's bad. That's a bad look. I feel dumb.
Error on us. Error on us. Us.
Maybe the real lesson is you shouldn't have two first names or two names that look like they could be first names. Like Duggan. Like come on. Your first name is a last name. Actually,
Yeah,
I don't
there you
feel
go.
that bad. I don't feel that bad.
Let's end on that parenting advice, Cody. You guys can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Cody Stavenhagen. I'm at Kieran _Steckley. Pod page at Tiger Territory _. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube so you can see the graphics, see the quotes as we're talking about it. We got this new presentation, a little facelift. We enjoy doing this, and we appreciate everybody who is following along in what is sure to be and continue to be an interesting offseason. So for Cody Stavenhagen, I am Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.